again. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special common council meeting of July 10th, 2020. The time is 7 p.m. The first order of business will be the roll call. Carrie,
Mayor Kim Smith,
present.
Tom Smith,
Present.
Dan Stevens,
Present.
Stephen Knott,
Present.
Jim Olson,
Present.
Diane Wolf.
Present. Thank you. We are all here. Item 2 is
That is so fun.
I didn't even say
There you go. So much for.
Okay, so that was the comic relief. Now we're back to public input. If anyone is listening and would like to give public input, please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. We'd love to hear from you. Is there any public who would like to address the council? Well, I'll ask 3 times just in case there is someone hanging loose. Is there anyone who would like to address the council? This will be the final call, asking if anybody would like to address the common council this evening. I don't hear any, so we'll continue on with consideration and possible action on the following items. Item 3 is the review of the projected 2020 financials and the potential impact on the 2021 budget. I'll turn it over to our city administrator for the introduction.
Can everyone hear me? All right, better than yesterday.
First, right?
I'll do a short introduction, yeah. I emailed and just put on, handed out earlier this evening so that you may follow along with me. But as we enter the 2021 budget season, which will end in November with hopefully a complete budget approval, it's important to note the purpose of tonight's meeting. Our ordinances lay out the annual budget process, which begins with estimates from each department and given to the administrator. As a side note, we don't really call them internally as estimates, but that's what they are as we look at the current year's financials and move forward. Followed by the administrator preparing a budget for submittal to the Finance and Personnel Committee, and then the full council for a hearing and approval in November. However, it was agreed that for the administrator's budget to best match the philosophical budgetary goals of the Common Council in November, the council should discuss and provide these goals prior to the start of the budget preparation. Wisconsin League of Municipalities cites the Institute for Local Government regarding good budgets. A good budget process should include establishing goals and priorities for the city, allocating resources according to those goals and priorities, and comparing actual expenses and revenues to those estimated in the current budget expenses, making adjustments during the course of the budget year as necessary. The first of those items will be completed this evening, which is establishing goals and priorities for the city. These goals and priorities should be broad and philosophical at this time. Not an examination of each line item is entirely, in my opinion, premature for that, as we still have about 5 to 6 months to go on the budget process to put those items together. The second item will be accomplished through the preparation of the administrator's budget, which is then given to the F&P Committee and Council for changes and approvals in November. The third item is handled monthly through the F&P Committee and Council normally. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we will also be doing a review this evening of the status of the 2020 budget and its possible impact on setting council goals for 2021. I do list some questions to help facilitate the discussion, which is, I believe, will be the second part of this meeting, and I won't cover those now, but we'll turn the floor over to Fred to review where we currently stand. There's been lots of concerns, obviously, about the effect the pandemic has on the city finances, which Fred will lead that discussion and lead through. I'm looking forward to hearing then the ideas that this council has about the budgets so that we can craft the administrator's budget to meet those goals and look forward to a healthy conversation. Fred?
Okay. Mayor Kim Smith and the council, I'm not exactly sure what kind of detail you would like me or hear from me. All of you should have received a copy of a document that was prepared by the assistance of the department heads and I, and then sent back to the department heads to confirm what I assumed, what they had given me in forecasting from the months of May through December. And that was on both on the revenues and expenditures side. Just a couple of things, just information only on housekeeping on a couple items is number one is you had on where you sit this evening, a couple of documents that may be discussed or briefly talked about is there's a canary colored sheet showing that the general fund wages and benefits amounts to 78.3% of the budget within the general fund. Another item that was in your packet next to you was a green sheet. The city of Onalaska in November of 2019 decided to exceed the expenditure restraint cap, of which then we would forego in 2021, $71,853 in that area. Another item that was handed out to you this evening was a white sheet. Sometimes it gets confusing when we're talking enterprise funds, special revenue funds, general funds. So I've just briefly outlined for each one's interest of what they are. So with that said, I guess I'm looking for what you would like to hear from me. If you'd like to go through something in the general fund, revenues or expenditures, and maybe you see everything you want to see already.
So I guess what Fred's asking for is what format do you want? You want him to just to do a recap, or you want to do question and answer? And this is our meeting, the council's meeting. So however you would like to see it proceed, I mean, we'll try to accommodate. Aldernott?
I would recommend kind of a recap, but then focus in on more specifically on areas that are either an area of concern or something that stands out that's different from past years. Other than that, I would recommend a recap.
I agree.
Okay. Alder Stevens.
And just to add for transparency to the public, how far areas that we are off specifically, not like by the line item, but how far are we off or how much have we been affected by COVID? And both the pluses and the minuses and what the net is. And from that figure, then we can parlay that into the next segment, which is starting to plan for the next year. So.
Okay. With that said, let's talk about the green sheets that's in your packet. That is the general fund estimated revenues. These sheets represent the original budget that was passed back in November. It contains on the next column going from left to right, the activity from January through April. And then they estimated with the department head's assistance, any revenues that they may be able to shed light on, the estimated revenue from May through December, then the grand total of those revenues. And on the revenue side, I actually wrote in pencil what the shortfall would be. And the ones that are listed there are all the canary colored ones that take a hit. So with that said, unless you want to go through each and every one of these, there's any particular one that you want to spend a little bit more time on the next 2 pages, you just let me know.
The one that would stick out the most is that clearly would be affected by COVID is the room tax revenue, as hotels are not seeing a lot of tourism or activity or having a lot of travel. I know that we have a deficit there, and some of that room tax is used for funding operations at the Omni Center, and some of it goes to LCCVB. The hole that's created from that, it's not under our control. This is a part of the market. How have we taken care of shortfalls in the past, and what's your recommendation for what we do this year?
In reference to room tax, again, because the room tax is an enterprise fund, the tourism fund that is the room tax dollars at the 8% that the city collects, a vast majority of it goes directly into the room tax fund. A small portion goes into the Special Projects Fund, Fund 204, by our methodology based on when these different rates went into effect. And then a smaller portion of the general fund portion goes into the general fund called room tax revenue. As you can see, we anticipated 38,576, which was, we anticipated like 10,150 some thousand dollars in sales. Okay, of that, a small portion was going to be general fund, special projects fund, and then for the methodology that is used, 1% of the gross sales, which is about 101,000, would go into the tourism first and then routed to the Omni Center. Okay, also the Omni Center, when the Omni Center budget was put together, approximately 60 some thousand dollars of additional assistance was coming out of the special projects fund, which was some of this money we just got done talking about, also assists the Omni Center. So there's two locations of sources of money that was assisting the Omni Center in its operation. 1% of the sales and roughly $67,000 was coming from the Special Projects Fund. So when the sales are down, that means the Omni Center is going to receive less dollars. And now keep in mind, there's one piece that is very important to remember is we may give 1% of the sales to the Omni Center, but roughly the last 3 years, a new law was passed in the Department of Revenue where they have to substantiate their dollars they receive from tourism for like what I call heads and beds, events that have happened, to substantiate the expenditures that they have to offset the dollars they received so that they don't receive more dollars than what they received or spent. And I can tell you, if you look at the last 3 years, we actually spend more money than they were receiving through room tax dollars. Okay, I'm not sure as far as how that's going to be clarified into the future year or future months, I have no idea. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. I can tell you that I had, just for information, each council member was sent a graph here roughly about 2 weeks ago or so of what the outcome was for first quarter at this point. So I think second quarter is going to be considerably less than what you've seen. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on
Fred?
page 1?
Yeah, I have a question. The building permits are way down, even though there's still a lot of building. Is that just because people quit building stuff during this time? Or it just seems like a big drop for just.
Well, yeah, I mean, keep in mind the 40,699 is for the rest of the year. That we would be down from the 120,000 budgeted.
Mm-hmm.
These figures in plumbing, electrical, and heating were provided to me from Katie Aspenson.
Okay. It just seemed like there's a lot of building going on and the construction industry really,
A lot of residential, slow down.
yeah, kept working, but okay, curious. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alder Knott.
Yeah, I think I'd recommend that before we start really focusing on individual line items, we take a look at the overview on the impacts on revenue and the impacts on expenses and see what the aggregate overall impact is. Because, you know, we were talking about how we offset this line or how offset that line, but we do actually have savings as well as what you're going to see. So I would recommend, you know, wait until we see the entire, you know, I guess budget health and then see about the line items personally.
So Fred, maybe if we could look at the totals, then the totals of revenue and then the totals and the expenses. I think that's what Alder Knott is getting at.
Sure. For the general public, I just want to mention, because somebody's going to say, well, we talked about a $24,000 loss. How come Fred all of a sudden says there's a $320,000 deficit? Well, to get up to that figure, I just want to mention to the general public is $154,456 is directly related to a shortfall within the Park and Rec Department. I want to also mention that $63,168 is directly related to the interest income. Interest rates when this budget was put together was 1.71, and we're roughly 61 basis points lower now. Those are the largest items. that bring the picture of $320,443 of a deficit of anticipated revenues to what I anticipate for actual. Any questions on revenue? Okay. One thing to keep in mind that we briefly had conversation on, just for a point of information, these figures do not reflect any anticipated revenue that was brought to the city through the Wisconsin CARES program, which is the federal funding. The city is eligible for approximately $308,698. Also, last night, you had seen that there was a potential reimbursement of $12,554 from the election side. Just wanted to mention, though, they have the dollars that I'm referring to of COVID-related expenditures to a certain level, which we're not exactly sure what levels of degree for reimbursement that it contains. Okay, with that said, then everybody wants to move back to the expenditures.
Yes.
Okay. The bottom line, if you're looking at from the bottom line, the expenditure, we have, we budgeted for anticipated expenditures of $10,183,948, anticipated expenditures of $9,845,316, which is a surplus of $338,632. Now, I can tell you, I could point you to 2 locations of which that takes place if you wish to hear them.
We do. We're waiting.
And tell us the page number when you reference that, please.
Yep. Actually, what I'm going to have you do is if you go to the last couple pages in your packet. The only problem is I'm not sure when I say the last 2 pages, let's go through the Onalaska Police Department, the OPD one first. Make sure everybody's there. It would probably be a white sheet way in the back.
Oh,
Got it.
Third to the last.
Third from the last.
Yep.
Okay, during the budget process, back in November, the city of Onalaska put in, and this, what I'm going to say is somewhat redundant on both the police and fire, 3 new positions in the police, 3 new positions in the fire. So with that said, we'll stay with the police department for now. Is the police department positions, new positions were put in there effective around April 1st with the understanding that Common Council will weigh in as to if and when this would happen. This was well before the pandemic set in. Then the next column right below that, well, so if you take 3 officers at $60,888 with benefits times 3, that's $182,664 that's in this budget. The next item is of the original positions within the police department, there's 1 position that's still not filled since the first of the year. And so what I'm taking there is taking 6 months of an officer, which is a savings of $42,276. Okay, and then when we talk about the bottom 2 items, then we can see how they are all paired up within the financial. Some non-budgeted items. We have the police department works 1,947.59 hours in 2019. In 2020, a contract was signed, which they agreed to get a $5,000 bonus and would be working approximately 2,069 hours. That's 121.41 hours per person times 25 officers at roughly an average of $32 an hour. Benefits, Wisconsin Retirement, FICA, and dollars, there's roughly $116,039 that is not in the 2020 budget. Okay, and to continue on in that little location there is if you take 116,000 divided by 12 months, I had stated earlier that we have 4 months that have passed. That means 8 months are yet to happen. So 8 months times that dollar amount is $77,354 that's not in the budget. And so you're going to see that figure when we start looking at the police department expenditures. In reference to the bonus, 5,000 times 24 police officers, that's 120,000. Now, if you slide all the way up to the front, to the top right, you'll see the 182,000 of the police officer positions, minusing the 120,000, that leaves left 62,664, plus that 6 months, which that one police officer position wasn't filled, gives you 104,940. So with that said, now I'm going to slide to the financials where you can see how all those figures fit in, and I'll tell you in a second what page that's on. It's on page 6 of 13. The number starts on, it's about halfway down the page, 100-52100. Jim, do you not have a set? I got an extra one.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot mine at home. Too much in a hurry. Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it.
You'll see that I actually made a little note on the bottom in reference to what we just finished talking about in reference to these positions. 3 positions, starting date of 4/1, 1 position still open of the existing. So starting down the page, again, just a couple of things I want to mention is the first item you see is that $77,354 that we just got done talking about, the additional costs for the police department for the additional hours. The next item is a brown, or not a brown, I guess they're called an orange colored, where it says 3 positions, the 62,664 plus the 42,000 of the original officers. There's your deduct in the budget of 104,940. So then there's a few other modifications made by the police chief. Well, then we go to the second page. When you look at the bottom line within the police department, the original budget was $3,514,537 compared to the budget estimations that we have here, $3,497,680.
Wait, where are you, Fred? What-
Oh, there it is.
On the second page, about approximately,
That's
7, okay, got ya.
that's
Yeah.
8/7 of
Where
13.
you're at the police department total,
Yep.
7 of 13.
So if there's no question in the police department, then we'll move into the fire department.
Are there any questions on that right now, or? Okay, let's talk about the fire.
Okay, again, in the back of your packet, there's a sheet that's entitled OFD. Similar situation, only a little bit easier, is that we have 3 positions, the estimated starting date contingent on common council approval of 4/1, totaling $167,937. I did an estimation of an absent of a police chief of approximately 2 months, totaling the 21,765. The 2 of those come together of 189,702. Down below, when I had stated in the police department, for example, they had 1 position that wasn't of the existing that wasn't filled. The fire department has 2 positions that they have not filled. And again, here I'm taking similar to what I did in the police department, roughly 6 months, because from what I'm heard from the city administrator and a variety of people, that these positions are hoped to be filled here soon. So then that totals 70,887. So with that said, without any further ado, we go into the general financials of the fire department. Okay, the 3 positions, FICA,
What page
WRF,
would that be on?
page 7 of 13, right where we left off on the
Okay,
police.
I'm just checking.
Okay. The first item we come to is overtime. We budgeted 46,000 of overtime for 2020. Today, through April, we spent 31,032. So that figure needed to be adjusted upward of an additional 40,000 to the original budget that could very easily be additional overtime requirement. The next item is is a decrease of 189,702. And as I had stated earlier, it's those 3 positions for 4/1 plus the absent of the police chief for 2 months. That comes to the 189,702. The next item is at 70,877. That is the dollars that was not spent for those two existing police positions from the original. Then a little bit further down, you'll see there was an assistant fire chief pay during the interim. That's an additional $3,750. And the rest of the items were sitting down with Troy Goody, interim chief, and the bottom line in the fire department, as we had originally budgeted, way on the bottom of that page, $1,709,446 compared to $1,500,450. Again, I indicated on the bottom, you got three existing positions, two positions that were still open, and a vacant fire chief for approximately 2 months. So with that, do you have any questions on that? Those are your two largest items of why there's a surplus within the expenditure side.
Okay, we'll go back to Eric.
Thank you. I think to answer both publicly and some of the questions that we have, obviously your balance is based on your difference between expenses and your revenues. So to go to the last page of the green sheet, page 3 of 3, showing the question is how bad is it in terms of revenue loss? Right now, we're anticipating revenue loss of $320,443 at the end of the year. So we're also, it's not our current status, so we're projecting forward losses beyond to the end of the year yet. Okay. So that 320,445. Then moving to the last of the, I don't know what color you would call that. Each yellow, tan. It's
Page 13 of 13.
page 13 of 13. I want to get the right number here.
It's 338,000.
So in the expense side, we anticipate $338,632 less in expenses. So what that means is there's about 17,200 or so to the good right now. To clarify, though, it's into the good, to answer the question, by not filling the positions that are currently left empty. Correct, Fred?
Yes.
So we are right now projected to be in the good. The items were budgeted to be filled, but they are not being filled, so we do not have those expenses in those. That's where he did the math to subtract out those expenses. So that's, to be clear, we're looking good for this year, but it's by not filling the vacant positions outside of like the chief, which we only took 2 months off of, for example.
Okay, we'll go to Fred and then Aldernott.
Okay, again, for the benefit of a couple that through the budget process, is this the 2020 budget was put together with 3 positions in the police, 3 positions in the fire. Those expenditures are there for 20, and if we move them to 2021, the only shortfall that you have is January through March. Because if you have it in this budget, you're going, and if you put it in next year's budget, it's at January through March that you have the gap or shortage. You also, so you have the shortage of these positions, however you may fill, whichever ones you may fill in the dollar amounts, but you also have the shortfall of the 71,000 in the expenditure restraint. You also will have the shortfall, because nowhere's in this budget is that $119,000 of the additional hours for the police department, because that was never put in. So that's something that's going to be a catch-up for 2021 as you move forward.
Thank you, Fred. Let's go to Aldernott and then I think Alder Smith.
I may have misheard too, but I just wanted to make sure I was clear that, based on the assumptions and the budget is laid out, including the assumption that we do not fill the police and fire, that leaves us with an approximately an $18,200 surplus. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. All right.
I'm good.
Projected.
I'm good.
That's
All
a
right.
question you had too.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing, so.
Okay, Alders, any other questions before we go back to Eric?
Part of the surplus was the grant you mentioned, and that can only be used for COVID-related expenses, or is
No,
that
that's
separate?
not in here at all.
The 308,000 is nowhere's in this calculations of revenue. The expenses are there. So what I'm saying is if and not all of the 308, whatever right now, through the expenses that we have forecasted, we currently have of all in the general fund and all enterprise funds, granted, there's definitely a large one that's not here, but roughly $47,000 worth of expenditures. Again, until we see the parameters of what is eligible for reimbursement, I have yet to see from the state.
So potentially the surplus that we're looking at could be larger based off of how much how much is refundable through the grant.
That's correct.
Okay, any other alders before we go to Eric? All right, we'll go back to Eric then.
I have no further insight to the program that Fred does right now. We're all looking at waiting for the insight. If, as anticipated, it is not eligible to replace lost revenue, it does make it difficult, but we do have expenses, the technology, for example, what's making this meeting happen right now, additional cameras for the meeting rooms, all of the glass partitions put into the counter spaces. So there are expenses that we have spent, which will be reimbursed. We're nowhere near the 300,000 yet in reimbursements. We're about 46,000, I think, is last time I had seen something somewhere around there. There's more to come yet, but it has to be in a direct relationship to our response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And not labor.
I'm sorry?
And not labor, as far as you know.
As far as we don't know, but I would not anticipate that, much as I would not anticipate, for lost revenue. However, if lost revenue is something that's eligible, you can see on the revenue side, especially when it comes to the Omni Center, that there's 100 and some thousand right away that we'd be able to plug in. So it could be doom and gloom, with nothing right now, except for 17,000 to the good right now, provided we don't fill the positions, or we could be in a very positive situation, depending on what the parameters of this program are, which we just don't know at this time.
Okay, thank you. Fred?
If I could have Carrie just briefly explain the only exception to the rule a little bit is that 12,554 last night. In talking to the city clerk, Carrie Burmaster, that overtime could be a potential reimbursement through that grant.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we'll go back to Eric to continue on, or are there more questions? Okay.
The only comment is it's better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So far, but it's so far.
Well, only because we have funded positions that we haven't filled. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
The importance of that conversation that we had about where we are is, as we look at establishing goals going forward, I think it's only fair that the council has a full picture of where we are. So, you're not creating goals that aren't related to our current situation. And so, we know, as Fred pointed out, 2021 will be a challenging year. It's not an impossible year, but also it's not the year to necessarily come up with really creative ideas that literally in putting the budget together have no chance, because we know the where we are right now is difficult. However, in the second page of my memo, what we discuss is, what are some of the conceptually, what are philosophical questions to answer in preparing in budgets years past here and other places. These are the kind of questions that are the basis questions where I start out with in preparing things. The challenge here has always been we haven't had this goal setting meeting before, so it was always anticipating what I imagine the council would answer to these questions, or in private conversations with each individual, getting a sense of where people stand. But these are really the questions that in preparing budgets I've asked, and I would ask you to consider. For example, are there any new initiatives or programs the city should be providing or can provide at this point in time that we don't currently provide? Likewise, knowing that our budgets are restricted through levy limits and expenditure restraints, are there any current services which could be reduced or cut? Is the allocation of general fund expenditures to each department in line with council priorities? I bring that up and just as the attachments today. For example, these are on the next pie chart. Budgetary functions by statute that we have to break down our budget to roll out there, and that's the general government, public safety, public works, health and human services, recreation, education, and conservation and development. By the very nature, by the departments, public safety, for example, is basically at 60% of your general fund budget. So it's the pie chart. Looking for that. Is that fully in line with the priorities and certainly from the actions taken from this council in the last budget cycle? I'd say that is, by looking at, adding positions that way. But likewise, the remainder then is where any additional cuts would have to occur or any new programming would have to occur. So that's what I mean about priorities and expenditures in line. Additionally, what direction should the city take regarding employees and compensation? This is a big question. As Fred pointed out, nearly 80% of the general fund is allocated to wages and benefits. So this means, is there a cost of living adjustment? Do we, fully fund performance steps increases? What are our benefits? How does it react to morale, recruitment, retention, liability? If we don't have good internal equity or we have compression issues, employee efficiency, et cetera. So, that's the 80% question right there is how do we look at that difference and its impact on the ability to provide the services? And then finally, really, does the city have an appropriate balance between the property taxes, the revenues that we gain, and the amount and quality of services provided? And that's really where the elected officials come in, because you're hearing from the public more than anybody. Do they appreciate the services that the city's providing them? Are there other services they wish to have? Other services that are deemed less important? And is there a fair balance between those services provided and the property taxes that they pay? And that's the goal. I specifically avoid the question of there's a quantitative value to that question versus a qualitative value of your total tax levy and your mill rate, because those are often compared, but have very little direct relationship on the taxes actually paid for the homeowner. Mill rate, for example, if property valuations increase in a given year, your mill rate could decrease, but you're still paying the same taxes. Right. And likewise, your total levy limit, if we're getting new developments and new properties that are now in your community paying property taxes, to reduce your taxes then, or at least maintain them, means that you have increased services, but you're purposely cutting off your ability to fund those services, even though you have new developments and that new development is paying property taxes. So those are important questions, and when we get to the budgets, we always highlight those questions. But in terms of preparing a budget at this point in time, I look for the qualitative methodology. How much are our residents complaining about services they provide is another way of looking at it, ultimately. So those are the kind of questions that I'd like to hear from the council, which would help me prepare as then I answer those questions. And so I'm not guessing at those priorities, and then you're sitting in a meeting or two in November having to make modifications. We can start from square one, establishing those priorities so I can craft the budget to meet those needs.
Okay, thank you for that, Eric. And with that, I'll say, I think we've kind of concluded item 3 on the agenda, which is reviewing the projected 2020 financials and the potential impact on the 2021. And now we're moving our discussion toward item 4, which is discussion and possible action, establishing council budget goals and objectives for the 2021 budget. I think with that being said, and Eric's description, so maybe turn it over to the counselors, maybe to identify some things that are important for you, that you want to be sure we include in the budget, and or things that you think should be more deeply considered before we include them again next year. Alder Smith?
Thank you, Kim. Eric, I think the compensation study, we've been talking about that's proceeding this year, but the impact will probably be 2021, right? I mean, it won't be nothing to hear. So I would think, we did commit to that originally, and we need to finish that up and see where it is. But I would think that that'd be something that we have to take into account as part of your item here regarding employee compensation and that distribution. So that's got to be a high priority, at least to me, because we committed to that for a number of years, finally did some action this year. And of course, it got delayed with COVID. But hopefully that will be some results of 2021 that would be impacted in the budget, I would guess. So the only other question I have is we have a lot of development going on, Abbey Road and a lot of these new places. Those all hit the tax rolls in 2021, correct? No?
No, it's the construction that happened from 1/1 of 2020 or prior.
Okay, so all that stuff that's being built now.
Like all down in the TIF district, the small
Yeah.
skeleton. I don't want to be quoted, but I thought it was like around 4 or 5 million, wasn't it?
Right.
Okay, so that'll hit later, not now.
And Abbey, there is a chunk, but I can tell you, when I seen the preliminary estimate for net new construction, less the tax exempt property, because you got to keep in mind, we don't collect taxes on valuation. The assessor looks at it, puts a value on it, or based on the estimates from the inspection department, that's not taxable. I haven't seen figures now that board review is over. That will be a component as a maximum amount of increase. In other words, you take net new construction, and the formula is a percentage how much you can increase the general fund to stay within the expenditure restraint caps.
Okay, thank you.
May
Eric?
follow up. One of the more confusing details of the budgets that I find that often the public doesn't really catch on to. So if I may take the opportunity to clarify this. We're beginning the 2021 budget cycle. The revenue portion that we're utilizing is taxes collected as of January 1st, 2020, payable in December 2020, January 2021 for the 2021 budget year. And so it is the board of review and everybody else reviewing the property valuations that we utilize for the next tax cycle is all based on the January 1st valuation of the property of this year. So there's always a lag, there's always a
I think
delay.
I hear a lot of times from taxpayers that, well, you got all this new development, it's going to hit the books, but that's not quite necessarily true. So it's an education thing too.
Yep. So we can see that, how much more, in particular, like the Great River residences have been built during this year, but you have to remember what was it as January 1st, 2020, in the middle of winter. That's the valuation that'll be in 2021's budget.
Thank you.
Why don't we just, if people don't mind, maybe we'll just come around this way and then everyone will have an opportunity to say something and then we can come back and rehash. If you can pass, if you want to pass.
Sure, I'll go. I just want to go back to, this is kind of item 4, but it's kind of more item 3. I just want to just mention that obviously I think we're all in agreement that we're in such a great position, financial position that we are right now, because we did put in the fund 3 positions for police and 3 positions for fire this year. I'm very cognizant of the fact that we have not filled those positions, and I believe the reasons why we chose to look to fill those positions in 2020 was because we felt that there was a need. And I haven't heard anyone say that that need has changed. So I just want to go on a record saying that I still have concerns, and whether we as a council need to reprioritize currently for 2020 positions that we have. But I'm going to still be standing up for those positions that we did look to fill. And I, for one, will be looking and talk and bringing forth to talk about, continue to at least talk about a fire position. And with whatever date we can agree on or whatever, but I think we need to look at our numbers, what is realistic, what can we do? But I think I'd like us to keep that in the forefront of our thoughts. Secondly, I agree with Alderperson Tom Smith. The pay study is at the top for me, and top to bottom for all employees, part-time wages, all the way up to the top. I think that's extremely important to me. Another topic that I feel strongly about is when we look at the number of employees that have been with the city for a number of years and looking out going forward, the number of retirements and the possible payout balances and such. And if there's a possibility of us being able to set aside a certain amount every year, however small amount, so maybe we can cushion the blow. I don't look at this as, unless someone can tell me otherwise, any different than when we fund the sinking fund for technology. We don't use that dollars immediately, and we kind of build up a balance. So I would just like us to be in a better position to be able to afford and not be kind of caught by surprise when we need to do any payouts. And lastly, something that I have talked with Eric in the past, I know Alderperson Dan Stevens and I did a newsletter last year that we took out of our own pocket and delivered door to door to 2,500 doors last year. And it was quite an undertaking that we took on personally that was extremely well received by our constituents. Then Third District Alderperson Kim Smith went ahead and did a similar newsletter that I believe was also very well received. And this is something that I think that would behoove the city of Onalaska to do in whatever fashion it may be. It could be a possible e-newsletter, it could be an app, some type of a push communication to inform our taxpayers more of what is going on at City Hall. Especially, we look at that election in April and you look at how it was an ever-changing event and people could have been better informed on a day-to-day basis what was going on. Poll workers, are they showing up or were they not showing up? Because it kept changing those last few days. There's seasonal things that are going on, whether it's between mowing and snow removal and just, and if you have any interest at all, I would strongly encourage you, Eric originally directed me to Bayside, Wisconsin, and I signed up for their e-newsletter. It's called the Bayside Buzz. I get it every 2 weeks, and it's a fabulous model, in my opinion, one way how someone models it. And it's so informative, really nice and clean and informative. And I always told him that he should never turn me on to something like that, because when I get really interested in something, it's something that I'm really going to speak highly of, because I think it would really make sense for the city of Onalaska, because that community is maybe 4,000 people. And I don't know why we don't have something like that to communicate better with our citizens. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Diane. I guess I'll go ahead and take my turn as well. Definitely support the things the elders have said so far, the compensation study. And I think I spoke pretty passionately about that when we put together this budget, that I felt it should have been further funded so that when the study is complete, that we have the ability to make some pay adjustments to the employees, especially the longer term employees, to make sure that we can retain them. I also think it's important that we continue to monitor the budget. Obviously, everyone knows, like, I'm going to be financially conservative about it, but I really think we put those 3 police and 3 fire in the budget for a reason. We need those people. We especially need, most urgently, the firefighters. And we can see that in the overtime budget, where we're just not meeting the minimum staffing that we need to meet to provide a very important service to our community. But another thing that I think is really important, and we've been doing fairly well, is succession planning, but maybe with a little bit different twist than Diane is thinking of it. To me, I agree, not that I disagree with having extra money for vacation buyouts or whatever, but the ability to either reorganize if that's what is in the best interest of the city, or to transition before we lose those experienced people. We know we're losing quite a few people this year with a lot of experience, and we know that we have several more probably coming up within the next year. And I really want to make sure that we can transition those people out so they can smoothly go on to their retirement without being stressed out right at the end of their career. We want them to be able to go out on a high note, confident that the city will continue after all their years that they've put in. So that being said, we'll move on to Jim Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got some difficult decisions to make. That's for sure. Thing that weighs on my mind is we have these promises that we've made and promises that we should keep to staff, but we also have a problem from the perspective of the taxpayer that the mill rate's getting up there, and so that we have to keep a track of too, because that's what we're responsible for. So it's a difficult decision that has to be made. Hopefully, some things will improve as the economy improves, such as the tourism budget and things like that, hopefully, as people get moving around a little bit. But I agree with Diane and the mayor that these are promises that we made staff, and we have to figure out how to do that and manage the other things. So we might have some difficult decisions to make, but I think they're right. The ladies are right that we made this promise to staff a long time ago, and it's important that we do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Olson. Alder Stevens?
Thank you, Your Honor. Eric had talked about some of the philosophical thoughts for what the budget should be going forward. I would like to use that time to maybe talk about that a little bit. I feel that our job is really to make it so people feel that Onalaska is a desirable place to live, to raise their family, and to do business. And so our lane really is to provide the core services that make all that happen. And I think I would commend staff on saying that the picture that we're receiving today is significantly more rosy than what we might have thought going into this picture. To contrast with some other communities that received money and essentially gave it away to different entities, and now are having to look at furloughs, we are, I think, in relatively good shape. So my main priority is we want to get through a pandemic. We want to put 2020 in back of us. And the best thing that we can do for the community is to be stalwart, keep providing the services that we have been doing through a really strange time. And we want to keep our employees well. And I think you've done a great job on that. We want to maintain our amenities and our infrastructure. So check that box too. And the last item I had is that we need to maintain our municipal fiscal wellness. And I mean, who would have thought we'd be looking at a surplus? So, you know, great job, everyone. I'm delighted that we're in that position. So the first priority, I think we just need to stay the course and get through the year. And it sounds like that's on plan. After all that's met, everybody else has kind of touched on this, that, you know, we need to right size our staffing, and we did make some, you know, we budgeted for more positions. I think that we got the buy-in from the public that they want more police and they want more fire. And dealing with attrition and burnout have been things that we've had to deal with, and this was part of the solution. We haven't come through on that, and that's it's part of the circumstances that nobody would have predicted a pandemic. But the onus of getting us out of this fiscal mess was really because we did not fill these positions. And I understand that we're not going to fill a position if we can't afford to fund the payroll that's associated with that. But we ask these frontline people in police and fire to save us, you know, literally, and now they've had to kind of save us figuratively. And I think that we need to, at the very least, reassure that, you know, recognize that they have kind of bailed us out of the financial hole, and they've really borne the onus of doing that. And I think that we need to lay out at least a timeline and renew, you know, recognize that it hasn't gone as maybe of what they would have expected, and lay out a timeline for when we're going to be able to hire. And I think maybe we could space these out, try to get one in police and fire towards maybe the end of this year, and then at later points in 2021, we start to add that second and third position in both police and fire. We made a promise. It's our job to make good on that, both to staff and to the public. And to Jim's point, I don't disagree that, you know, we need to pay for this and we need to keep the levy in line with normal growth patterns. So I think we're doing that, and I think it's just a matter of timing and making sure that everybody is recognized for their sacrifices, and then reassuring that we will set this right. The wage study was talked about. We need, you know, it's not just police and fire. There's other people that work here too. That then should be another priority. And I like to point out that a lot of times we look at the more high-profile positions in police and fire, but there are other departments that often get overlooked. Parks does their job without fail, and they don't really complain, but every year there's less and less man hours, and it seems like we've added parks and there's more for them to do. We need to show them a little love, and we need to set that right, because the amenities that we have are part of what makes Onalaska a good city to live in. I think we have some parks that are not used, and we should look at trying to make it so the parks that we have are the parks that people visit and use and enjoy, and that could maybe help alleviate some of the manpower issues. You know, Public Works, I don't hear a lot from them, but again, they haven't really come across on the budgets for the radar for personnel. Sometimes we need to acknowledge the people that are doing their job and not yelling the loudest. I know that HR was up for a position and they sacrificed it in last year's budget. You know, I mean, people have made cuts for the good of the city. So in a nutshell, we need to right size and look at different departments and what is the way that we can fill the needs of the city most efficiently with the resources that we have, and honor and respect them and reward them as is appropriate. As far as new initiatives, this is going to sound like a broken record, but I agree with Alder Wolf. If anything that through the COVID process has shown us is we could find some ways to improve outreach to the public. We looked at recently the garbage can pickup, and we don't really have a way to get messages out to everyone. Whether it's a public newsletter that people could subscribe to, that I see that would have some merit. In the last year, we started an arts committee. There's really no funding for it. I think the idea is that they will provide a lot of their own funding, but I think a few $1,000s so they could maybe do some printing to help start raising their own money, perhaps create a Friends of the Onalaska Arts, and maybe they can use that to self-grow. I agree again with Alder Wolf that if every year if we know we have employees and sometimes they retire and there's costs associated with their retirement, we should budget for that. So if somebody retires, it doesn't throw the whole budget out of whack. So those would be my thoughts and philosophy for the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Stevens. Alder Knott.
Yeah, so I'll be parroting some of what we've already heard here too, but you know, I'm looking at the memo, for instance, that Eric sent out where he talks about the Wisconsin League of Municipalities setting out what a good budget process looks like. And the very first one is the goals and the priorities. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and state what my personal views of priorities are to give some guidance to the staff. And I do want to caveat that though, because it can be misconstrued. You know, I understand that everything we do, public safety, the governance, the infrastructure, health and human services, conservation, recreation, they're all important. That does, by me establishing one or two priorities here, which I'm going to do in a bit on what I think they should be, does not mean I don't care about those other areas. But we live in a world where resources are always less than what the needs are, or especially what the wants are. All right. So with that said, for me, my number one priority is always public safety. I know, for instance, if one of my constituents were to have some type of an emergency, say a house fire, whatever it might be in their own lives, they're going to care far more about whether or not they have an immediate response of a well-trained firefighter, EMT, or police officer arriving on site in timely fashion than they are about whether or not Steve Nott is their alderman, as an example. Or I mean, that's going to be their number one focus, is because their safety is important. And then number two, I think, is the good governance, and that's where it comes in perhaps with some of the compensation concerns and what have you that the mayor has brought up as well. So, but with the public safety piece, yeah, I would like to even take a look at some feasibility studies on whether or not by the end of this fiscal year, if it would be possible to get some of these firefighters on board, because the cost could be offset by reduced overtime, the $18,000 surplus, and any type of COVID expense reimbursements that we receive. Now, we'd have to take a look at that on whether that's a 1, 2, 3, or even a 0, but I'd like to look at what the feasibility of that is even this year. Certainly, I would like to see by 2021, trying to fill the police and fire as fully as possible to include potentially all 3 of those months in January, February, and March that are currently not funded, is what my understanding was, that they're only really accounted for March or April on, so that there was still a shortfall. So I'd like to look at seeing if we can bring some on this year and trying to bring all of them on by next year. And then my second priority for me personally is I'd be looking at what are we going to do to make sure we can retain the staff that we have, and how can we reward the best workers in the governance portion of the city.
Thank you, Alder Knott. We'll come back around to Eric then, if you want. Oh, you don't want to? I think it's nice. It's
Background
nice
a little
to
more.
hear everybody's input, and I think that I feel like we are pretty much all on the same page. We're all really grateful for the good staff that we have here, taking care of business and treating each other, our community, and our taxpayers' money with care so that we can end up in this good position. So those are some priorities. As far as, does that help you, Eric, or do you have?
Absolutely.
I guess we didn't really have anything. We only had things that we would add. We didn't really say anything that if push comes to shove that we were willing to give up. Would that be something that would be helpful for you to have us discuss?
Most certainly, when we're looking at possible actions in 2020 to fill positions, that will have to be part of the conversation. While we're projecting forward both the expenses and the revenues for the rest of the year, it's break even basically without those positions filled. So filling those positions will cost money from somewhere else. So yeah, any insight as to those kind of program priorities would certainly be useful for 2020 as well, leading into then even if it's partial in 2020, what that means for a full hire of those positions in 2021.
We do have several positions that are vacant and that we are not in the actively recruiting replacement for.
In police and fire, yeah, we were waiting until to be able to balance that. As for other departments, there is the paralegal and administrative assistant for the administrative position, which we recruited for, but we have not taken any further steps under the pandemic. Is there another one somewhere that's currently?
Talked about that.
The HR or the deputy clerk position.
Yeah, deputy clerk position, although that is part of the budget, that's not been eliminated off of what Fred's calculations were. So that one's funded.
So that's
in the
fully
numbers you've heard.
funded for the year. So that's a potential.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to fill the position, but.
Yep.
Alder Wolf?
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. So Eric, I thought it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought it was this last week's F&P. Did HR, hello, how?
Did you hear us talking about you?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Hope could just do a recap of the position. You just went over it. but-
If I could just ask one specific question, when we were talking about the status of the position for upstairs for the paralegal, did you say, I thought you said at F&P last week that you were looking at, looking to get back to City Hall and then possibly reaching out to those who interviewed to see what their status was. Has anything been done at this point?
Yeah, we haven't interviewed anybody at this point. We had set up interviews, but we actually haven't interviewed any candidates at this point. So at this point, that position, we would have to reach out to candidates to even see if they're interested, because it's been since, I think, March, since we last even reached out to them. So that would be one open position that we have right now that we have not filled. We also have the IT position that we have not filled at this point. And then there's the positions in the inspection department that we are looking at having GEC take care of through contracting. So I don't know, I know that we're contracting those services out. Yes, there's some payouts that we have, but I don't know what kind of savings that we'll have in the long run with those services. And then with the deputy city clerk position, that one will be filled, and we've made a contingent offer to somebody in the finance department to fill the position for Lisa, who is replacing Cindy. So right now, that's what we have for vacant positions. So we have 2 positions right now that are open that we have not. One that we had intended to fill, we just haven't had an opportunity, and the other one, what we are waiting kind of to see what we want to do with that position.
And so as a follow-up question, since it is on the agenda as review of projected 2020 financials and potential impact, would it be improper for me to talk a little bit further about the paralegal position and whether or not we could refer that to F&P and discuss that further in the filling of that?
Let's refer to Eric.
I'll tell you. Probably misspoke a little bit in terms of what my intent was, but if you look on the tan peach color page 1 of 13, if I put a nice 1 circle there, you'll see the vacant position with roll-ups underneath the legal departments. And he has the description of that down below. It was filled through January 21st. We have some roll-ups there. It's been vacant February through June. And so the vacancy I'm referencing is, it's currently vacant through June because we haven't hired a position. So the 28,115 is the half of the year, the position that is vacant. So it is to be hired as we're talking about, but what I meant to reference is the fact that this is included.
So
That vacancy has been, the current vacancy is already in the budget.
The current what?
The current vacancy has already been in his calculations here.
Oh,
But
for
the
the
rest of the
year.
budget is where I'm thinking I probably misspoke,
Ass-
is included in the numbers.
It is, so it's assumed right now with Fred's that it will remain vacant for the rest of the year.
No, it'll be
No,
filled. The rest
Oh,
of
it will be filled.
if, I think another way of
That's where
saying it would
that's
be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If
Yes.
the position wasn't filled, we would only gain what's listed there in the gray, in the
Right.
orange,
Gotcha.
because
Okay.
it was accounted for that it was vacant already. It's
Gotcha.
not like gaining a full position.
Right.
Thank you.
But I think if you were looking at filling something, either police or fire, you're not going to have that position for the full year
Right.
either.
No.
So if, in other words, if that's what you were looking at, you would see a wash, in other words.
Hope, can you talk about, just like first talk about the fire, because we have the current vacancies that are not the new positions that are in the process of being filled, like where we're at with that and building our candidacy, because I think part of the reason I haven't felt I don't think any of us have felt an urgency to apply pressure to determine when these new hires could start is because we couldn't even fill the natural succession backfilling. So we weren't even at a position to have people to fill. So could you maybe just talk about that a little bit, but then do it separately so I don't get confused?
So currently, we have one candidate, like I said, that has passed their background. They need to complete the physical agility. They have not passed it twice, so they have one more opportunity. If they don't pass it, they'll move down to the bottom of the list. And if we get to them again, then they'll have an opportunity to do it again. The second candidate that we have done a background check on, I don't know if they've passed their physical agility yet, but they are going through the process of, we're still working on the background check. Once they complete that, then we will be at the process of completing the physical agility. And then if they pass the physical agility, then they would do the psychological and the physical. So then that would be one. And then we have to go to the next name on the list if that first person doesn't successfully pass the physical agility. And so we know that we've had one person who has opted to basically opt out of the recruitment process. So we've already lost one candidate. Another candidate lives in Virginia right now. And then we have another one that was hired in Holman. So slowly that list is getting whittled down. We had 7 on the list, so now we're looking at 4.
You're trying to fill 2 positions.
And we're looking at filling 2. So this is a struggle that we're having. So right now we're looking at hopefully having 2 positions filled this summer is the goal. And so I believe that we do have qualified candidates that would fill at least those 2 positions this summer from the list that we have right now. If we needed to go to fill firefighters from the next, for the 3 that are new that were budgeted, we would have to probably start a whole new process, which we do have the application process open so that we can continue that process of doing applications. And so basically once we're kind of working on the fire chief and other police officers, then looking at starting that process again and creating another eligibility list. So kind of ongoing doing that process. With the police officer positions that we have, we still have 1 remaining open. We just had the Police and Fire Commission meet tonight. Both have been approved to fill. So we have 1 position open right now. But ultimately we had, I think, 4 apply that actually came to the testing out of the 8 that said that they were going to come to testing. 4 actually came. 1 failed the physical agility test. 3 showed up for the interview. 1 did not pass the interview process. And so we have 2 candidates basically for a recruitment. So this is the struggle that we're having with police and fire is eligibility lists. And we have 2 very qualified candidates for the police department. So I think the struggle is I know those additional positions, like right now we have the 1 position, is police and fire are struggling, wanting to get those positions filled, understanding that there are budget constraints and those kinds of things. So
Hope, in today's environment, if you were given the nod, how long from like, okay, we'll make the money happen, go start to hire this officer or firefighter? How long is the process realistically at this point? You get the okay to we start them?
essentially, right now, we had, I think, 2 positions that we had opened from the beginning of this year, and we're in June, and we're still trying to fill the 1 position. So realistically, right now, we have 2 candidates that we really could fill the position pending backgrounds and psychologicals and those kinds of things. So should they pass those, then right now they've already passed the written exam. They've passed through the PFC interviews. They've passed the physical agility. So the last 2 things they would have to pass is a psychological and a physical. That would take basically probably another month for them to go through the background check and then the psychological and physical. For the fire department, they're going through the process of that physical agility within the department, and then they have to go through, finish, because they're working on the backgrounds. Once they complete that, it's a psychological and the physical. So if we get those 2 filled, more than likely, we'd probably have an additional two, I'm not sure if we'd have two more on the books. We'd likely have at least maybe one or two from the existing list that may pass. The problem is I don't know if they're going to pass their backgrounds. That's the issue that we've been having with a lot of police and fire candidates is they're not passing the background checks. And so we may have to start another list. That could take another 3 to 6 months logistically. Ideally, another 3 months.
So if we wanted to start somebody by the end of this year, we should probably start the process by September, at the
Yeah.
latest, if not sooner.
I mean, literally, yes.
Okay, Eric, I think had a comment.
I just want to clarify a statement I made earlier about not filling any positions. The intent of that statement was by not filling the 3 new positions within both departments that was authorized. Fred's numbers do include filling positions that are currently there and vacant. So the 1 position in fire, 2 in fire and 1 in police
Correct.
are included in Fred's numbers already.
That's why I kind of brought that up again
Yep.
to like be like, we're still trying to fill these before we
Yes.
can even start to. fill
And that's still in that break-even number where we are right now.
And that's the challenge that we have is right now we have at least some qualified applicants. Will they be there 6 months from now when we can fill these positions? No. We will have to start all over again.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Hope. That
Thank you,
was
Hope.
good.
No problem.
Thank you for being here and coming to the podium. Alder Stevens.
This is more of a general Fred question. So when the bid process came in on the reservoir, we were about 450,000 under what we were budgeted for. Assuming that that comes into plan, what's the process? Does that just stay in capital improvements and we can spend that on something else? Does it get returned to the taxpayers? Do we carry it forward to the following year and borrow less?
I'll let Fred answer that.
Okay, okay, well, back up a little bit, is the water department is an enterprise fund.
Go to
Enterprise
this
funds.
sheet.
Yep, enterprise funds have to be self-sustaining. You probably recall through the budget process, the Common Council has given the authorization for myself and Hawkins Ash to do a full Public Service Commission water rate application. I think you're also fully aware of the article that was put in the paper, and I don't want to be quoted, Eric, but I want to say it was like a 30 or 40% increase. What happened is when we submitted the application, I can quickly get you the actual percentage if you wanted. But when we submitted the application, there was an individual that does nothing but looking at water rate applications, did a big article in the paper about what the city is pursuing for water rate application increase. Okay, in those figures was Jared's estimated cost of doing the reservoir. Okay, and what I did this morning is once Jared had released that, I sent this information down to Hawkins Ash, to send to Monica to see if she needs to look at that as we move forward, because maybe the percentage will come down a little bit for water rate increase. Keep in mind, there's many different scenarios. We're not even on the look at Onalaska water rate application yet. That's how backlogged they are due to this pandemic. So when we do look at it, then we'll be able to look at that direction if there's any materiality of the differential between what we speculated versus the actual. But you got to keep in mind what's always scary about that, and I've seen it time and time again, is unforeseen costs.
Or there's a change order or something like
They
that.
find out there's clay where they're going to put the,
So what Fred is saying is that money will stay in the enterprise fund.
yeah, we did it through
You
the,
just said that, Fred.
sorry.
I have a question for Fred. The 2020 census, I know that they'll be counting it. Will that have an impact on, not this budget, but future budgets?
Well, I'm sure there's a calculation. here, but, you know, this whole pandemic, I think is going to slow that process down drastically.
Mhm.
Because I don't, and you definitely won't see nothing in 21, potentially 22 and forward.
Okay. Based on the population growth and stuff, yeah, okay. I kind of figured that, but I had to ask.
Okay, I think Eric has a question or a comment.
Just as a follow-up, often, like the COVID-19 response from the feds to the state, there is a soft tier of 20,000 that often sort of defines a large municipality for, direct grants and other ones. So for example, La Crosse was a recipient of a direct grant. We were not. It was not something we could apply for or anything else. It was based on the size of the city. I believe it's 20,000 is sort of that cap that they utilize. So if everyone returns it and we get a good count and make 20,000, then I think there will be a benefit to us long-term. It won't necessarily be a direct benefit to our 2021 budget, but I think there are certainly benefits to us to be a population of that size.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to say?
Still, I just want to reiterate, much more rosy than what we were anticipating. Good job to staff.
Okay, last chance if anyone wants to speak. Alder Wolf.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to thank Eric and Fred and all the department heads who took the time, the trouble, the energy to put this packet together. I know it was a line by line item thing, but I think to have a truer picture going into 2021 and for Eric to have more firmer numbers to going forth, I think it was a necessary exercise. I know about a year ago, there's been talk at council for us to have, once the council is seated after the April election, to have a yearly talk like this. And COVID just kind of prompted it even more so. So I think this is a really good exercise to have. I think this is something we should always have. And I look forward to having this in the future because I think it just benefits all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Wolf. Anyone else?
No, I concur. I mean, I think you're right on. That's, you guys did a nice job.
This has value.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion by Alder Wolf, second by Alder Olson to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. The time is 8:25. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Too bad.
Not at all.